We are live.
Oh God!
That's the first time you
live!
fucked that up.
Oh.
You love it. You always go, "We are live."
We are live. Welcome to Doing Bits Live. Sorry about that. Basically, I'm having some building work done, and there's a lot of dust everywhere, so it's getting into the back of my throat. Anyway, welcome to Doing Bits Live, the podcast with myself and Vittorio Angelone. Hello, Vittorio.
What's the crack? How's it going, Eshaan?
Yeah, good man. How was your day?
My day's been alright. It's been pretty chilled out. The sun's come back out. I think when it's grey outside, I find lockdown much more depressing. But when it's sunny, I kind of have a sunnier disposition.
It's amazing how long we were all like, hey, lockdown's all right, while the sun was out. We're like, fuck, this is terrible. Right, so Doing Bits Live is the podcast where we invite some of our favourite comedians from all across the world to discuss the ideas that Vittorio says are
Quarantined in our brains.
Quarantined in our brains. And today's guest is absolutely brilliant. He's very funny, very, very nice boy as well. One of my favourites on the circuit. It's the wonderful Jacob Hawley. Hello, Jacob.
Hey, man. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm a nice boy, so I'm fine.
You are. You're a very nice boy.
That's my favourite intro I've ever had. A nice boy.
Nice boy. Are you... If you're on YouTube, you can see. By the way, if you are on YouTube, please do ask questions. The more questions you ask, the more fun it's going to be. It's going to be fun anyway, but it's going to be even more fun if you ask questions. Jacob, just for the people on YouTube, whereabouts are you sitting? Where is that? The landing.
Yeah, I'm on the landing basically.
Which is the weirdest place we've had anyone so far, I think.
That is so cool.
This is like, do you want to? I'll give you a little look if you want. This is like,
yeah, let's do a house tour. Right,
let's do Cribs. This is MTV Cribs.
Yeah.
I need a little
Cribs.
door. Hang on. Right. Oh no, it's gonna fuck up. So look, this is like my little desk area in front of a window.
That's nice. That's like a beautiful mind.
Nice.
That's good.
And then that's downstairs.
Yeah.
And then this is the bookshelf full of porn and.
Yeah.
The old John Barnes.
See, that's what we like about Jacob. He keeps it vintage. He still buys books, porn books, and porn.
Yeah, graphic novels.
Erotic
like,
novels.
fuck the internet. Just thumbing.
I'm old school, man. Yeah. I used to. Let's not get into it too much. But when I was a young man, I used to really enjoy a bit of erotic literature. Do you know what I mean?
Hi, young.
Like 14?
14.
Really?
Yeah.
It's the maddest thing I've ever heard.
Not authors. Do you know what? Fuck it. I'll recommend it to people because I actually think.
Let's talk about this.
There's a website called Literotica.
Okay.
Please tell me you're not making this up.
You can look on it now. It's 100% cheap. Okay. And there's people. So people upload. We've been going 6 minutes. How have we got to this so quickly?
Come on, this is great. Come on.
Literotica. So people upload like stuff from like books and shit, or they just write their own. And I used to fucking love it. It's quality.
I
was it arousing?
Yes.
Was it arousing? Was it arousing for you?
It was. Yeah. I reckon I went through a good maybe year when I was about 14, where I would read that more than I'd watch porn.
Wow.
I've never spoken to anyone about this before, but that's true.
That's so good. I think I should check that out because I think there's just like getting your brain turned on, different thing, isn't it?
It's amazing. It's properly amazing. Do you know like how in horror films, yeah. The best horror films are the ones where you never see the monster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the monster that your brain can create is better.
It's never going to be. Yeah.
It's scarier than anything that they do with.
Yeah, because it's personal to you. It's whatever you want it to be or don't want it to be. Obviously, there was a teacher in my school. There was a teacher in my school who had a short story published in a book called Tales from the Clit, and somebody photocopied it and like threw it around the school.
Tales from the Clit.
Was it good?
No, it was terribly written.
I mean, do you know what the dark side of literotica? And actually, I think this is probably the case with pornography. I stopped watching porn a couple of years ago, but with literotica, the most popular stuff is incest.
I think that's
Is
true.
it?
That's true of everything, I think.
The top 50 list is all incest, and obviously the difference between like and there was like a taboo section.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I don't need to say, but that wasn't really my bit. But like, you know, there was some fucked stuff in there, like really fucked stuff. Because obviously, with porn, you know, you can't actually make stuff that's fucked, you know, unless it's dark web, whatever. You can whatever you want.
So that's a weird thing. A mate of mine did a one-man play where he had this whole bit in it, and this is so not funny. He had a bit in the play where like he basically described himself as a 6-year-old like fucking his sofa or something, and then afterwards was like, why is that okay for me to put that image in your brain, but it's not okay to like, do you know what I mean, do a cartoon of it or whatever?
And especially if someone, you know, with literotica, you know, people are sat at home wanking. So it's how is it any better if they're sat there imagining their own bestiality?
And there's that whole argument around like child sex dolls. Like where, like, is there an argument where they get to get it out of their system and don't feel, but
The podcast where we try and find solutions to help paedophiles not be paedophiles.
Jesus Christ.
Jacob Hawley, tell us about your paedophile show.
Oh my God. Do you know the funniest thing is that for most of the time you were talking there, Vittorio, I was genuinely considering it. I was like, yeah, man. Does that wean them off kids? Does it encourage them even more?
Which direction does it go
in my head, I was like, is it like giving a dog toy and it bites the dog toy rather than biting someone? Or is it just encourage them to bite? I don't fucking know.
One thing I say is that we always try and recreate the kind of conversations we might have in a green room.
This is spot on.
This is the car. This is the car home.
This is the car.
This is the car home.
You can't do this in a green room with another comedian know you that well.
No, and this is if you've done a gig like a long way away with like 3 people you don't really know, and one of them starts doing this talk on like the M4. This is when you're looking at Trainline going, fucking hell, it was only 20 quid for the train.
Yeah, it would have been worth it. It would have.
Right. Okay. I do have 2 follow-up questions. I don't want to dwell on this too much.
Let's find the joke. Is there a joke in this?
Well, do you know what? I did want to talk about porn in my show that I was going to do this year. So let's come on. What's the follow-up questions?
Okay. So the follow-up questions I had is, number 1, what was your section? And number 2, did you ever submit anything?
The answer to number 1 is lesbians.
I think that's a young man's game.
Yeah, it is.
I think lesbian porn's a young man's game for sure.
When you're 14, nothing is better.
Yeah, you don't actually.
I've grown out of lesbian porn.
I think that's what happens.
I definitely did before. As I say, I sort of stopped watching it a couple of years ago, but I definitely did stop watching. But yeah, when you're 13 or 14, there's just something fucking like insane about lesbians, isn't there? And I don't know if it's because I didn't really grow up around any. I didn't know anyone who was a lesbian when I was younger.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So that was definitely my section of literotica.
Right.
I never submitted anything. I've never tried to write erotic fiction. Do you not just get turned on whilst writing it and have to stop? and if you're not getting turned on and having to stop, it's not good enough. Yeah, exactly. It's like you know when a chef.
It's like writing a joke that you don't think is funny and persisting with it. Like you're writing it and you're like, this isn't going to be funny.
Yeah.
Erotic authors are the most disciplined artists alive.
That
or
is
it just takes ages. or it just takes absolutely fucking ages. It takes days.
You've got like a concert pianist versus.
I've met concert pianists.
Someone who writes erotic literature.
They're nerds.
What?
Concert pianists drink whiskey. That's my experience of concert pianists.
I've never written erotic fiction. I don't know. Would I want to write erotic fiction? Not really. It's
I think there is a show in this. There is definitely a show where throughout the hour you end up writing some erotic.
But is there something in if you've ever sexted in a way you've written some erotic fiction?
I have been complimented many times on my sexting chat.
You really?
Yeah.
Now, okay. This is right. I want to get into this.
Let's get into this.
I can't sext, man.
Can you not?
Not really. Now, what do you do? Do you do? I think there's 3 tactics. You create a kind of fiction of like, if I was with you right now, I would do this.
Mm-hmm.
There's telling them what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or
there's telling them what to do.
Or telling them what to do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it, yeah, because I've done it before, and you kind of get lost in the kind of make-believe scenario that you create together. And then I sort of get confused. I'm like, hang on, are you actually doing that? Or is this what you would be doing if I was there? Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I normally steep it. If I was with you, we would be here doing this.
Okay.
And the compliments that I've got is the detail. So where my right hand is, where my left hand might be.
It's not the fucking Macarena.
How far away from their ear I might be breathing. Where on the neck I'm kissing them.
That's erotic fiction. You're
That's what that is.
Erotic fiction. Oh, no. That definitely is, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's like a choose your own adventure erotic fiction.
Do you have the texts still? Do you have them saved?
No, I don't think I do. I can probably find out though. Yeah. Am I going to read some of my sexting to you?
Mate, fuck doing bits live, right? We did a new podcast, and it's not about making stand-up. It's about workshopping erotic fiction based on sex.
It's so fun. Actually, genuinely, we should do this. This is so funny.
We should go through our best sexts. I mean, I don't really have any. I'm in a long-term relationship. So
get some comedians over and get them to build on. That'd be so funny,
mate. Because it is that is a fucking erotic fiction, though. You're writing a little scene. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And
if you've been complimented on it, on the detail, that obviously means you know what you're doing.
Yeah, seems to be. Well, there you go. Who knew? I'm now going to quit comedy and right now, because no one's doing any stand-up, I'm going to write fucking erotic literature. Watch.
Do you know what I'm thinking? Is there ever any instances in the Literotica website or any other erotic fiction where it blends into those other types of sexting? So it wouldn't be the one where the author's telling you what they're doing, because that doesn't feel real. But do you think there's any erotic fiction where it tells you what to do in the text?
Oh, I see what you mean. I've never encountered that, but I bet there is. There definitely is, isn't there?
Yeah.
I wonder if that...
Do you remember those gay... I don't know, you guys are probably much younger. Yeah, you're much younger than me.
Yeah, definitely.
Those adventure books. Fuck off. Those adventure books, choose your own adventure books, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know of them. Yeah, I know what you mean.
So could you do like an erotic version of
Turn to page 100 and whatever.
Yeah.
And then back to here.
What it comes down to...
literally bandersnatch.
Yeah. Now we can.
Okay, there we go.
The problem with anything like that is that the male experience of sex is very much doing what I have to do to reach one moment, whereas obviously the female experience of sex is kind of enjoying the journey. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to try and get through one of those like RPG novels, like you just be fucking flicking to the bit where you get to finish.
Yes, it's like the same.
We're not enjoying.
It's the same in porn videos. There's like the bit at the start that you watch, and then there's the bit at the end that you watch, and there's this whole middle bit. Literally anything could happen in the middle there.
Jacob, you haven't watched porn recently. This is just based on what I've heard. On porn videos now, they actually have bookmarks for different positions.
Really?
Yeah, so you can scan along and be like, okay, I want doggy in this scene, or I want, whatever it might be.
There is
like a contents page going through.
Yeah, so just along the time bar, you've got little bookmarks that you can select.
There are choose your own adventure videos that exist where you have to like click a button and you go to a different, like, do you want to do this or do you want to do this?
Do you know Ahir Shah?
Yes.
Yes.
He had a really good bit of material about how he was taking antidepressants that stopped him from ejaculating, and he literally got to the end of a porn video. He's like the only person who's got to the actual last few minutes, and he sort of half expected them to sort of look at the camera like, "Are any of you still here?" And if so, why?
I think we may have, launched a new podcast.
I like it.
Well,
let's talk about it afterwards.
Yeah, we'll knock up a treatment, get it out there.
Studio 71. What do you think of this? BBC Studios. What do you think of this?
It's definitely not one for BBC Sounds, I don't think.
BBC Sounds. Right, so let's get into it then. Good minutes in. Tell us what you miss about live stand-up.
Do you know what? I didn't think that I did miss it, to be honest with you. For the first sort of couple of months of lockdown, I didn't think that I did. But then I did an online gig. And it's like, oh, fucking hell, this is good. You know,
really?
So you enjoyed the gig? You enjoyed the online gig that you did?
Yeah, I did. Do you know Always Be Comedy?
It's supposed to be set up really, really well.
Oh, mate, the geezer's insane. I mean, so the gig itself in Kennington, he has like a sort of core audience who always come, and they're proper like comedy fans. You know, they write fucking blogs about comedians. They're incredible audience, very responsive. You know, clever, everything you'd want. And so he's basically got them as the kind of virtual front row. So you do a Zoom call and you can see them and you can hear them laughing. And then he had like 350 other people just watching on the video feed, which gives you a fucking buzz. Yeah, and you can see the chat. You can see them talking about your act whilst you're on stage. Or well, on stage, I was sat here, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That my weird little landing.
How fun.
That's what made me realise, like, fuck, I missed. It's just that, do you know what? I don't know about you. I go to bed at like fucking 10 o'clock now. Like during lockdown, I go to bed at 10, half 10, and like I was like, oh god, the days do feel quite empty. And I realised it's because like the time that I'm going to bed now would be the time that I'd be starting work.
Yeah.
Walking on stage the time that I'm going to bed, and it's like, I mean, I didn't sleep that night after that online gig. Seriously, I was nearly in tears. Like,
because you hadn't had that feeling for so long.
I hadn't had the feeling. I hadn't even thought about it. I'd been so like caught up with other shit that I hadn't even really thought about like, I've been doing it 6 years, and so like, I mean, the adrenaline, the response. Also, and this was I think it would have been a different thing if I'd have just gone and done all my old material and it had gone how it used to go. But I did new material, new gags, and they worked. You know, not all of them. There was bits that could have been better, but like, the punchlines, and it's like, fuck, man, and that. I miss that. I miss comedians. I miss seeing my peers and my colleagues.
Having these kind of conversations about erotic literature.
Yeah, exactly. Who the fuck am I going to talk to? I can't sit and talk to my girlfriend about that. Like,
child sex dolls.
how to appease and yet nullify the threat of paedophiles. And whether appeasing a paedophile is worse than nullifying. Yeah, man. I miss all that. I mean, there's bits of it. I was gigging a lot. I was like, 6 nights a week I'd be out and I'd be doubling a couple of them, and I was doing a fucking lot of gigs, probably too many. But yeah, I do. I fucking miss it so much. I don't think we'll gig until January earliest.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if we did.
I mean, there's the carpool thing, isn't there? Do you see?
Jamali's doing that.
Chris. Yeah, well, it's
I am.
Yeah, Jamali's agent. Yeah, Chris Quayle's set that up.
These are all stopgaps, though. They're not. Are they going to exist when stand-up is back?
Will it feel good? Because from, I mean, I haven't spoken to Jamali or anyone about it, but like, you can't hear them laughing because they're in a fucking car.
Yeah, we said that too. Is it like, do they beep their horns or like?
That's gonna be it, man. That's what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
That's like
Although on Zoom, at least you can hear something.
Yeah, but this is why the Always Be Comedy thing worked so well, and I'd love to do it again because, and I'm doing a couple more online gigs. I'm doing one on Saturday next week, but you're right, it's stopgaps. It's stopgaps till we're back to work. But yeah, man, I fucking missed it. I do miss it a lot. I didn't think I did. As I said, I didn't think that I missed it, and I think it's because I've had a fairly nice lockdown. You know, I've been with my girlfriend. We're quite lucky in our flat. We've got like a little communal garden, so I can sit out there with the neighbours and have a drink and whatever. So it hasn't been the worst thing in the world, but like, yeah, I've definitely missed it more than I thought I did.
Is there a particular place that you look forward to performing back at?
I love the Glees.
Make a beeline for the Glees.
I really like the Glees. I had so many weekends at the Glees booked in, and I probably won't do that because I'm having a kid in August, and so I'm probably not gonna, go and sit in a fucking hotel room on my own rather than be at home with my child. But I mean, Top Secret's the obvious one.
Everyone said that. Literally everyone.
Because it's fucking electric, man. Like it's and you're upstairs, downstairs. The comic, Nico's there. I really like Nico. Mark, obviously, everyone else went. But that's a nice one. I mean, as I've sort of been doing it longer, I do just like big crowds. Get 200 or 300 people in a room, and it is fucking nice. That's one thing I do miss, the complete flip of that, which is previews. I actually probably miss preview season as much, if not more, than Edinburgh.
For those who aren't familiar with it, explain to us what preview season is.
Oh, okay. In this country, I'd say a good portion, I'd say over half professional comedians do the Edinburgh Fringe every year, which is kind of like a sort of half festival, half industry fair for comedians to perform their works to industry and reviewers and producers. So we write 60 minutes every year to perform at that festival, and during June and July you basically do what's known as a preview of that show, maybe 4 or 5 nights a week. And so during June and July you're running around and sitting on a train for 2 hours, writing for those 2 hours, trying out jokes on stage. And it'll be small audiences of, sometimes a handful of people. But I think creatively, it's the most gratifying thing I think you can do in stand-up is those previews where you've got complete license to do whatever you want. And and I think as I've been doing stand-up longer, I've kind of learned that for me, I write on stage. I prefer writing on stage. I'm not someone who can really sit with a laptop and an empty A4 document on Word and just bang out 10 minutes of material. I'd make it up as I go along on stage and record it and listen back. So, yeah, I definitely miss preview season.
Has there ever been a preview where you were like, oh boy, I don't want to do this?
Yeah, I previewed. So, long story. So I was my first show, my debut show, 2 years ago, and in this country, and I don't know if it's abroad as well, but here we put a lot of value on what's the debut show. The debut show, it's their first show, which is so stupid. It's so stupid. Fucking dumb, because it's obviously your worst one. Because there's so much gravitas and weight on it, people rush into doing it before they're ready to do it. It's not, people think it's the same. I think they've got the terminology from debut album, right? It makes sense that a debut album is a band's best work. It doesn't make sense that a debut show is a comedian's best work at all.
Agreed.
Ridiculous.
I was one of those people that went too early, in my opinion.
You sort of did a year before me, didn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, even I think I probably did it slightly too early. I think I probably had half a show when I did it 2 years ago. But anyway, I was working with a director, and he's a very good director. But his idea, I'm not sure I agree with his idea of the best way of doing the first session together. What he said we should do, he was like, okay, he's got some connections with a venue in London. He was like, right, let's put on a show at 5 PM at my venue in London. You'll probably only get like 3 people there. It means that you can't cheat and riff off the audience. It means that the material, if there's any holes in it, will be very those holes will be visible. I'll watch the show for an hour, and then we'll do like 2 hours of notes together afterwards. Cool. Okay. Turn up for the show, 4:45, and there's like 12 people in the room. And I'm like, this is weird. We didn't really promote it. I didn't put anything on Twitter or Instagram. I didn't try to get people to come. There's 12 people there. Turns out, a local police station, it was someone's leaving do. And just by chance, 10 pissed up police officers were in the show. And I don't know if I've made my politics clear by now, but it's not the sort of stuff for police officers. So it was horrible to the point where like halfway through I asked if they wanted me to stop. One guy just sat in the front row, just on his phone, just visibly just scrolling through Facebook or something. And the whole time, there's someone who I'm paying to be there, sat at the back of the room, taking notes on my performance. Deck was there taking notes on me, and then we sat for 2 hours. I remember afterwards he was like, "Do you want to go upstairs and do the notes?" And I was like, "Oh,
not really."
Well, no, of course not. I've got a beer, and I went up, and he was like, "Right, how do you think that went?" I was like, "Oh, don't play the fucking game of how do I think." So yeah, that stands out as like the worst of those previews that I've done, I think.
Let's go back to a happier time then. When was your last gig, and how did it go? Where and
the last gig I did was it was actually Top Secret with Nico Yearwood, who you had on the other day. The thing is, I've almost erased the gig from memory a little bit. It was a last minute thing. Someone who worked there just texted me being like, "Are you free tonight? Do you want to come down and do 10 of new stuff in the middle?" I was like, "Yeah, fine." I was tired and lazy, and I didn't actually do new stuff in the end. I just did old stuff, and it just went fine. But because it was literally like the Sunday before lockdown happened. Like lockdown was coming, man, and like it was people were talking about the coronavirus a lot, and there was I don't know if Nico mentioned it when you spoke to him, but there was a weird feeling in the room.
He didn't say anything.
Oh, did he? Oh, or maybe it was just people felt a bit cautious and edgy and not really comfortable with what was going on in the room.
They weren't really, I don't know, they weren't really laughing.
Yeah,
it was like, I smashed
must have been coronavirus. It must have been
coronavirus. But it did, and I remember, not Nico, but I remember another comic who was on that night did a gag about, what the fuck are you guys doing here? Like, people are dying of this fucking disease, and it didn't get a laugh. Like, it was, people were genuinely, you could see sort of people looking at their mate being like, I've told you we shouldn't have come to this. But yeah, that was the last one, and I was supposed to be on tour with John Kearns.
Right.
I do John's tour support, and I remember the day after that, the Monday off, we were going to set off for like 5 nights in a row on the road, and I hadn't insured my car, and I had the car insurance people on the phone, and I was like texting John, being like, "Are they going to pull? Is it pulled, or are we going?" And he was like, "I don't know. I'm waiting to hear from the venues. I'm waiting to see if they're going to pull everything." And I remember literally got to like 4:30 in the afternoon, and I was like, "Look, I need to fucking know, because I need to insure this car." And he was like, "Yeah, the Glee in Cardiff has pulled one," and then they all pulled, and then he cancelled the hotels, and it all fell apart pretty quick.
Well, I was hoping that we'd turn back to a happier time, but that went sad very quickly.
Do you know what? I can tell you. So this is quite funny. So the Thursday before we were supposed to go, we were doing we were doing the tour in Reading,
right?
And I was doing the support slot. And you've done support before, haven't you, Eshaan?
Yeah.
Have you done support slots?
No, I was about to do it for a decade over there, but he pulled out of it.
Oh, really? Were you doing Eshaan's tour?
Yeah.
I was going to get him to do something for me.
So it can be quite hard spots, can't they? Support spots.
Yeah, and it depends on. I've had all permutations of it, which I'll talk through in a minute. But
I've done one. Fuck, I just remembered. I've done one for a mate of mine, John Maher. I don't know if you might know John.
Oh, I know John.
So it was for a work in progress thing. I just did 15 at the top at the Bill Murray and Angel, and it is strange.
I think with Kearns especially. I mean, in my opinion, and I'm a huge fan of John's, and he's a good mate of mine. But in my opinion, I think he's one of the best comedians working in the UK at the moment. Like, but what John does is very specific.
Yeah, very specific. Yeah.
It's very fucking. If people aren't aware of who he is, he's a historic act. I mean, he's the only person to have ever won both Best Newcomer and Best Act at the Edinburgh Fringe.
Back to back. Yeah.
But I mean, he's got sort of the fake teeth in his mouth. He's got a sort of tonsure, which is a sort of monk's wig.
Yeah.
He speaks in a strange voice. He shouts a lot. He stays. It's magical stuff, but it's odd. And so if you're into that stuff, it means you're into a very specific kind of comedy. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not really a weird comedian. I'm a pretty normal comedian. And so it could be tough, but he was quite good at introducing me in a way that was helpful, if not shambolic. I mean,
did he come on before you?
Yeah, he'd come on before me.
Right.
It would always take at least 2 or 3 attempts to get me on the stage, because he'd get me on and then he'd sort of say, oh no, that wasn't, and he'd fuck about, but it was funny. But anyway, I was doing my support spot and it was going quite well, but then someone literally vomited in the second row, just all over. And this was the day that Boris...
This was in Reading? It was
in Reading. Reading Civic Arts Centre or whatever. And it was It was the day that Boris' speech where he was like, I'm going to level with you, a lot of people are going to die. And so there was that kind of fear in the air of like, fuck.
Oh, shit.
So someone vomited all over the second row, and then someone at the back of the room, after like sort of 5 seconds of, and I'm stood there just with the microphone out. And then after about 5 seconds, someone at the back of the room stood up and went, I'm a doctor. Nausea and vomiting isn't a symptom of the coronavirus, so don't worry about it. And that got the best response of anything all night.
That's so funny. Everybody must have gone, way!
Yeah. It's incredible. Because there was just 5 seconds of everyone in the room going, oh, fuck.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, we're all going to die, yeah.
That
is so funny.
Yeah.
My talk support, it's been quite eclectic, because I've done Dane Baptiste, who brought me on with just an announcement backstage. Hal Crossenden, who would make jokes about how I was his brown servant, taking on the bullets, which was really funny for his middle class crowd. They didn't know whether to applaud or not, Rory Bremner was a weird one for me to do, because he'd come on loads of impressions and I'd come on. And Rory's audience, these are Radio 4 heartlands.
Yeah.
But they're also overwhelmingly white. So I'd turn up and it'd just be a bit like, oh, this is interesting. And I've done Cindy V. So it's been a bit of a range. But yeah, it's a nice thing to be able to do, to be able to learn how to play those rooms.
Yes, it is. And it's a fucking nice experience being on the road with someone, especially if you get on with them well. Yeah. And you stay in hotels and, you can get pissed, and it is fun. But the gigs themselves can feel a bit strange, I think.
You mentioned this earlier, which is how you write and test your new material. Has that changed over the 6 years that you've been performing? That whole process?
Yeah, well, I think it's changed just in the sense, I think, it'd be mental if it didn't, in your first kind of 5 or 6 years in comedy. I think it'd be mad if you started with the same method that kind of served you to this point. I mean, it's trial and error, I think, because there's no one who can tell you how you're going to do it at the beginning.
Yeah.
No one's going to sit you down and go, okay, Jacob, you're gonna find it best to do little subheadings and then little tags. So yeah, I have learned that I sort of develop ideas on stage best. Yeah. There is an element of writing at home, and I do try and take the time to, when I'm at home, think about what words I'm using, go back and listen to recordings of myself on stage and think about what words and think about structure and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I think you can't beat a good muck around in front of an audience. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Vittorio, how long did it take for you to realise that you can just hone material? You don't have to write new all the time.
I think part of me, it took not doing 5-minute sets. I think when you're doing 5-minute sets, everything has to be so punchy that it's hard to expand on any ideas in a 5-minute set. And even if you stick on one idea for a 5-minute set, that's not like the extent of how long a joke or a premise can be. Do you know what I mean? So until you're doing 10s, 15s, 20s, you don't have room. Like, I remember I wrote my first callback when I was still doing 5-minute sets, and I couldn't use it yet because...
Right, it didn't fit.
There's not enough distance.
Exactly. Everyone was just like, oh, he's going to say this. He's going to say that thing that he said 37 seconds ago. Do you know what I mean? It's like...
Yeah. And also, even if you want to stick with one topic for 5 minutes, even though you're sticking with the topic, you still got to fit in how you're going to introduce yourself, say hello. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? It's not as if you've actually got a full 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Address all the elephants in the room that come with you as soon as you walk on stage.
Yeah. I always felt that, like, anytime it's a 5-minute set, if you get heckled, you're like, all right, now I'm going to do crowd work and then I'm going to leave the stage. And that's going to be it because... And it's going to be useless because, like, what did I get?
Unless you come up with, like, something really good in that crowd work and then a very similar dickhead comes to another gig.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's really useful.
I remember when this is very true and very funny story. When I first started stand-up, one of the first people I saw headlining a gig was Sunil Patel.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Sunil Patel, if you look him up, a lot of people get us too confused. We also do a radio show together. He's a very good friend of mine. When I first met him, we got chatting, and he said to me that there was this WhatsApp group of Asian comedians where they message one another to just clarify what material everyone's writing so that nobody tramples on anyone else's toes.
Mad.
So I took this information. I was less than a month in. 2 weeks later, I messaged Sunil. I'm like, Sunil, tell me more about this WhatsApp group. Like, obviously, I guess you have Pro to get in. And he was like, no, I was making that up. No.
There should be, though, because you guys all make the same jokes.
Yeah. Honestly, when I see another Asian person...
short conversation. It's a very short WhatsApp group.
Yeah. When I see another Asian person on the bill, I'm like, fuck off. This is representation gone mad. It's too much.
Yeah, I do think... I think that, like, anytime I'm, like, next to another Irish or Northern Irish person, I'm like, at least put someone normal in between us. But then I'm like, wait, I'm normal? What am I doing? It's fucking stupid.
Yeah. Do you have that when you see you, Ed Knight?
Yeah, Jacob, do you get that with other Jewish comedians?
Me and Alex Edelman.
Oh, fuck. Ah.
I get told that I look like Alex sometimes, and I've been told I look like Tom Rosenthal. They're the two that I get told that I look
You're like if they fucked each other and had a kid.
You look like a well-fed Alex Edelman. You don't have... Do you know what I mean? It's not a fat thing. It's just Alex looks really gaunt.
He's bigger than you think. Have you seen recently?
I picked him up from Kent a couple of months ago.
This is how people talk about footballers. He's like, oh man, I saw him live. He's actually good. Roberto Carlos, bigger than you think.
So I saw him at Volts Festival. I mean, Volts Festival was fucking 6 months long, so that could have been any time.
Exactly.
That could have been 2018. It's still Volts Festival in 2018. Jesus Christ.
Is there... I'm interested in this with you, actually. Are there topics that you think are off limits that you wouldn't want to talk about?
Not off. I don't prescribe to the way of thinking that I'm not one of those people that really thinks that we're being heavily censored or that they're. I've personally never had much experience of people being. I mean, I've had walkouts because people are offended by what I'm talking about. Like I've in Edinburgh, I had a woman bring sort of two quite young, not young, no, like teenagers to my show, and they walked out because I was doing material about drugs. I do material about drugs quite a lot. But are there topics that I don't want to talk about? There's topics that I worry that it's not interesting for me to talk about.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
As in,
like
is Eshaan gone?
I thought he was just listening. Because if you look at the freeze frame, he looks like he's really interested in what I'm saying.
This is a doing bits first. This is the first time this has ever happened.
I was like, I was talking then, and I was looking. I was like, fucking hell, Eshaan's loving this.
His Wi-Fi, he just WhatsApped me. His Wi-Fi dropped. Oh, fuck's sake!
He's not saying the most profound shit. As if I've just blown his mind. As if he's like, yeah, man, there is no sense of it.
There's he's messaging me now. He's got builders in the house, and they've pulled out a wire. It's just me and you, baby. For the rest of the fucking show.
I don't remember what I was talking about.
So you talk about drugs a lot. These
Oh, right, topics that I don't want to. Yeah, I get more worried about topics that it's not interesting for me to talk about. Like, I just think if I don't have an angle or an experience that relates to a topic, why the fuck should I talk about it? And then also you kind of think, you always kind of want to feel like you're doing something that's somewhat unique or at least personal. So I've had bits of material that I've done before, that are sort of about dating or about, and I'm just like, that's a boring thing for me to talk about. I've got experience of interesting shit that I could be talking about. Why not talk about that rather than just be another straight white male comedian talking about dating? Do you know what I mean?
Did you do you ever have any? Because how old are you, if it's not rude to ask?
I'm 28.
You're 28, so you started when you were 22, 21, 22?
Yeah.
Did you ever get any pushback? And I hear this, and it really fucking annoys me. Where people say like, oh, loads of stand-ups start way too young. Like, what are you going to talk about at age 22? And my reaction was always like, well, all you did was work in an office for 10 years.
Yeah. Definitely. And do you know what I mean? If someone says that to you and they've like fought in a fucking world war,
you're like, okay.
Then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, you've got a rich bank of material. But if they do that and then they go on stage and just moan about their fucking wife, you think, well,
and you have all these comedians being like, we've all got that one guy in the office that's like this, and you're like, what? Like, I'm here talking about working with refugees in India. And you're like, yeah, what about that guy that eats fish at lunchtime? Fuck's sakes.
Yeah. Yeah, Bill uses the microwave for his macro. He gets on our cogs a little bit.
But did you ever get any of that?
Yeah, definitely, because I think, as I sort of mentioned earlier, I was doing material at one point that was, slightly sort of like righteous and kind of opinionated and on certain issues. And so, yeah, there was definitely an element of, what do you know? But I think that kind of led me into sort of thinking, okay, well, what do I know? Do you know what I mean? What do I have a perspective on this? And I think it was actually a kind of a useful thing to hear. Not that I necessarily agree that young people don't know anything, because young people do. Like, I've got material about 3-night coke benders.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got that because I wrote it when I was 25, when I was doing 3-night coke benders.
Yes.
Yeah. If I'd have waited till I was 42 to start doing stand-up, it would have been about a bloke in an office. So I don't think that youth is necessarily an implication. And also, we by and large only talk about stuff that's happening to us fairly recently. Do you know what I mean? I've never seen a middle-aged comedian do much material about what they were doing when they were 30.
100%. It's always the other day. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, that's
which does usually mean a year ago.
Yeah, 100%. But it's never 10 years ago. Do you know what I mean? It's never.
But no, so there's some stuff that I'm thinking. There was some stuff I was going to write about this year, or that I kind of was writing about this year, which was about a topic that I don't really know anything about, and I was hesitant to write about. But then I write with someone who I had some material about transgender people and transgender and sort of people's attitudes towards transgender people, and I was hesitant to write it because I don't know anyone who's transgender. I've never suffered from dysphoria or problems with my idea of my identity of gender or anything like that. So I was reticent to do that. But then I sort of spoke to someone who is more experienced, and she said to me, she was like, well, you kind of need to speak up because the trans community kind of need other people to talk about us because we're a small community, but we're vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of applies, you can kind of have this thing of, oh, you're a straight white male, what do you know? What can you talk about? And I think you kind of have to say, well, we kind of got a responsibility, you know, and also it's more interesting to talk about other stuff, you know. I mean, like some of the stuff that I'm working on this week is about the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
And you could go, well, why should a white man talk about that? And you
it's
go, well,
so important.
It's important because white men are the problem.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You look at who's fucking stood around in their Stone Island jackets defending fucking statues. It's white men.
Yeah.
You know, so I kind of think we should be talking about issues like that. So yeah, I don't feel like anything's off the table in that respect.
It is a weird thing. I think there's this phrase that keeps coming around, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, that a lot of the problems come from the fact that there's really shit comedians who just want to be offensive. So you can't have these fixed rules where you go like, you should be able to joke about anything. I think you should be able to joke well and like kindly about anything, but not, you shouldn't be able to fucking just be mean to people and expect that to be a fucking joke. And that's the balance.
And also, I mean, this is the thing. You see people fucking moan about this all the time. Oh, there's censorship. There isn't censorship.
No.
Like when you hear these comedians go, "Oh yeah, well you can't really do comedy," it's like, "Or what?" Like, did the police don't turn up at your door?
Yeah.
You don't get booked. Why? Because people don't like it because you're not very good.
Yeah.
That's a commercial decision made by someone who's basically saying you're not going to make us any money because you're shit. It's nothing to do with you being censored. If you're being censored, you'd be in jail.
Yeah.
No one's in jail. You know, fucking Count Dankula got in trouble because he was citing rhetoric that caused that caused 6 million Jews to die. That's the only person who's ever been prosecuted of that sort of stuff. You know, Konstantin, whatever his name is, the geezer who was doing a fucking unpaid charity gig and got famous from being asked not to do certain material.
Yeah.
Like, mate, if I said to Barry Ferns at Angel, if I was like, hey, Barry, I'm thinking of doing some really like shit stuff about, I don't know, like really nasty stuff about people of different ethnicities, he'd be like, please don't. That's not censorship.
Yeah, it's the same thing as like, I remember once I was at Angel on one of their new material things, and I was like, am I okay to bring a book on? And he was like, no, rather not, because it kind of like, we'd like to make it look like a kind of this level of show so we get a better bucket, so we do whatever. And I was like, oh yeah, sweet.
Your book wasn't censored.
It's like, it's just, it's bizarre for people who place themselves on the right wing of politics to be against something that comes from a place of the bottom line of profit.
Yeah, from commercial interest.
Yeah.
From literally commercial interest. That, you know, it most of the time it's people going, well, an audience isn't going to pay to hear something that's, I don't know, somewhat sexist, somewhat homophobic. So that's why I don't want you to do it. It's I don't know. I think that whole kind of argument is getting dangerous now because it's kind of been hijacked by people on the right who as you said, I think a lot of the time it's just an excuse for not being very good. I mean, one of the, you know,
and it's also it's a way to segment the market, and it's a way to get famous, because you have these white male comedians who have this idea in their head that they can't get on TV and they can't gain any kind of following through the traditional methods. So they position themselves as this underdog who's not allowed to say anything and is fighting the good fight for free speech. And then they get a big following from it because there's a lot of fucking idiots out there.
Yeah, mate, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And it's kind of hooking onto this strange other, you know, I think feeling amongst the nation of that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, I've never felt censored, and I don't think you need to. I think some of the best comedy recently has been stuff that you would say, you know, there's stuff in like Sticks and Stones, for example, Dave Chappelle, which is, you know, near the knuckle stuff. It's one of the most successful specials of recent years.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're good enough, I think if you're good enough and you've got the necessary experience, you can talk about anything.
I was going to say this, and we need to do some material. This is why Eshaan and I both host the podcast, because I'm great at tangents and Ishan's great at the structure of the podcast.
But then his fucking builders cut his Wi-Fi cables, and now it's 10 o'clock at night and we're talking about Hannah Gadsby.
But there's also, like, at different stages of your career, as you gain more trust from your following and gain more of a following, you can breach different territories, because if you're doing a 10-minute spot, you have to gain everyone's trust and everyone has to understand where you're coming from as a person before you can satirize any potentially offensive stuff. Do you know what I mean? Whereas Dave Chappelle has 20 years of trust built up in the culture of comedy and in the audiences of comedy to go, he's doing this for these reasons and we know that he's got these views or whatever.
And that's expanding now. I mean, I think, you know, things are obviously changing in the sense that people are using the internet more, and on you know, there's online stuff, and people, you know, record a big special, cut clips down, put it out. Like, for example, I saw Adam Rowe. He's done that recently. He's done this big special.
That's great.
Adam, if anyone hasn't heard of him, he's really, really good.
He's episode 2 of this podcast.
Oh, has he done this?
Yeah.
So he released like a sort of short clip from that today. And now previously you'd go, well, that's actually quite dangerous, releasing a short clip from a longer set, the context that you've built up. As you say, there's trust that you've built up with an audience, so they kind of know what you're... Mm-hmm. But then the flip of that is Adam's releasing that on his Twitter account where he's got, I don't know, however many thousands of followers who know what his politics are.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They've seen him talking about the Black Lives Matter movement. They've seen him talk about, you know, social class. They've seen him talk about whatever else he's spoken about.
Yeah.
So in a strange way, I mean, I remember Stuart Lee 10 years ago sort of talking about context within comedy and how, you know, the Daily Mail could come and film a minute of his show and then put it out of context, and it would seem really offensive, blah, blah. Whereas nowadays, you kind of build your own online audience who know who you are.
Yeah.
And it kind of protects you because, you know, you can say stuff that's maybe a little bit more out there, but people know your politics and what you actually think about stuff.
Yeah. Let's crack on to some material while Eshaan's away.
Yeah, sure.
Just because I'm aware of the time. Do you have any ideas that you've got knocking around?
Yeah, I've got something, and it's not, you know, it's nowhere near being material yet, but it's an idea.
That's good.
So basically, on Sunday, I wanted to attend the Black Lives Matter protest.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go. I thought it's the right thing to do. And I was going to meet my best mate there. Now, at the moment, my missus is back in Ireland with her family.
Oh, mad. Where from? This is tangent.
She's from Mayo.
Okay, cool.
And I've been spending the last sort of week or two like getting used to living alone. And one thing I've learned over the last week or two of you know, doing stuff by myself and you know, when you do it yourself rather than as part of like a sort of structure and routine within a relationship, you start to question things. I've noticed, I empty a dishwasher, I take plates and cups out of a dishwasher and then just put them in a cupboard. And then I take clothes out of the washer dryer where they're dry and they're fine and then just put them in a cupboard. Dishwashers and washing machines are just cupboards. When you think about it. What's the point in taking a glass out of a dishwasher, putting it on a shelf, then putting it back in the dishwasher? Why not just leave it in the dishwasher, use it and put it back?
Yeah, especially if you're living by yourself, because you don't need like another wash of the dishwasher to go on or washing machine. Do you know what I mean?
Clothes, yeah.
Wrinkles.
Wash. Why take the no? But it's pants.
All right, yeah, that's fine.
Pants, and anyway, crucially in this case, it was a hoodie, a white hoodie. Now, on Sunday, I wanted to go to the Black Lives Matter protest. I spoke to one of my neighbours before I left. My neighbour is an actor who has done some films about football hooliganism.
Okay.
He's now
Elijah Wood.
No. I don't want to say who he is because I've not.
Yeah, no, don't. Yeah.
This is okay to do yet. He's in quite a lot of WhatsApp groups with real football hooligans, which does make me question how method the acting was. Yeah. Anyway, he was telling me, and this was on Sunday before this had really become apparent, before the statue had gone down. He was like, I'm not going to go. And I said, why is that? And he goes, because a lot of my mates who are football hooligans are going to target Black Lives Matter protesters to protect statues and to represent the far right.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, fuck, I didn't think that was going to happen. He was like, yeah, that's a big thing. I was like, fuck. And he was like, so, I don't want to go because I'll have fucking mates of mine who are racists and saying stuff against Black Lives Matter protesters, being like, "All right, mate, what are you doing? Come on." I was like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." Anyway, I was meeting my best mate at the protests. He'd said to me he was going to grab some gloves and masks on the way.
Mm-hmm.
I was late leaving. I called him. He was like, I forgot to bring the masks. I was like, fuck. He was like, just wear a scarf instead. I was like, okay. And then also I looked out the window and it was raining. So I grabbed a hoodie out of my washing machine where I've just been leaving all the shit because it is just basically a cupboard. By the time I got on the tube, I was wearing a white Stone Island hoodie. And I had a football scarf wrapped around my face.
Yeah.
In a way that didn't look like PPE at all. That just looked like a fucking hooligan trying to
cover their identity. Yeah.
Everyone was fucking looking. And also, like, people were wearing black. Everyone was wearing black clothes and to sort of match the Black Lives. I'm stood there in fucking white. Like, honestly, and like, people were looking at me, man. And I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. When I speak, I've kind of got an accent that sounds a bit like a football. So I was trying to speak posh. Like when I answered the phone, "Hi mate, how's it going?" So I didn't sound like a fucking hooligan. So I looked like this weird posh hooligan, like some posh kid who was doing cosplay as a football hooligan as part of a gap year or something. And then I was supposed to be meeting him at a train station, but the train station that I was supposed to be meeting him at was closed. So I had to get off a stop early. So I called him as I was leaving this station. I was like, "Where are you?" He was like, "Well, I've had to leave." He was like, "My phone's going to die." I was like, "Where shall I meet you?" And he said to me, "Well, let's meet at the Churchill statue." And not realizing, he didn't realize this was, and I was like, "Fuck this." So I went home. I just thought, fuck it. I'm not taking the risk. I'm not going there. And like the worst thing would be if there were hooligans around that fucking statue and they see me coming, they're like, "Hey,
wait, come on!"
Yeah, and I'm looking around at the fucking like people that I'm supposed to be protesting with, like, "No, I'm not one of them."
I promise.
But then I do think that kind of so that's as far as I've got with the sort of stuff that I'm. With the kind of, that's the incident essentially.
Yes.
Right? That's the anecdote. And you can kind of, I guess I can kind of like build that out by talking about the ways I would have tried to get out of it if I had gone or whatever. But I do think there is something to kind of be said about the fact that most of those blokes who are stood around statues, protecting statues or campaigning against Black Lives Matter or whatever, they're mostly working class football fans.
Yeah.
And if you look at what's happened over the last sort of 4 years of politics, it's largely sort of turkeys praying for Christmas. In the sense, it's working class people voting for, the Tories or voting for Brexit. Things that aren't going to benefit them.
Mm.
And I think there is a question to be asked about why they're against the Black Lives Matter movement and the kind of divide and conquer that's happened through.
Yes, they've been told that it's someone else's fault. That's been the rhetoric the whole way through.
They've been told it's someone else's fault. They've been told to hate people from other countries, and also they've had no education. As has been spoken about, there's no education about the British Empire at schools.
Yeah, and
then if you are a working class person, you go straight to work. In a job where you're not going to learn anything about the world in that sense.
Well, yeah, most people don't. I think we're in quite a interesting position where comedians are always learning and like thinking about things. I think a lot of people spend their lives not really thinking. Do you know what I mean?
Not because you don't want to and it's uncomfortable to. I've found there's been stuff I've spoken to friends about over the last few weeks and things I've thought about which are fucking uncomfortable to think about. It's more comfortable to just go, "No, fuck them, Dave. They're the problem." Do you know what I mean?
Well, the weird thing that I've realized is like, and I want to write a bit about this. I've got a lot of at the minute, but I think because everything's so heavy and serious in the news and everything, I've got a lot of ideas, like you said. Like I've got a lot of concepts and thoughts about the world that I really don't know how to make funny yet.
This is it, yeah.
I want to talk about the fact that when you learn something new and unlearn something that you used to think was the truth, what you're essentially realizing is that the person that you've been for the entirety of your life to this point is someone that you now disagree with. And that is a horrible, horrible feeling to kind of hate your past self.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so hard
to admit defeat almost. Do you know what I mean? Because we're taught to be so fucking defensive of our own opinions and views that conceding that you might not be correct or that you might want to rethink something is admitting defeat.
Yeah.
And I think there's an interesting thing about the reason that working class men do tend to make up the people that are anti-Black Lives Matter, that tend to be the ones who are racist, homophobic, sexist. I don't know what's funny about it.
It'll take a while to figure out.
But I think that could be a good bit. And I think, and again, it's something that's kind of interesting for me to talk about. Why? Because mates of mine, I'm in WhatsApp groups similar to my neighbour. I'm in WhatsApp groups where mates of mine are going to go down this Saturday and stand around statues. You know, I am someone who knows a lot of people who are fucking racist, and I'm having a tough time at the moment arguing with a lot of them. Do you know what I mean?
And it's hard, and everyone just gets so polarized. And I think it comes from both sides. It's not just the side that needs to learn that finds it scary. I think the side that's trying to educate makes it an unpleasant experience. It doesn't feel like they're trying to educate. It feels like a lot of them are trying to like shout at people and tell them they're wrong. It's not like, okay, this is what you don't know, and I think you would benefit a lot from knowing this. It's like, you're fucking wrong, you're racist, you need to address this, da 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 da. And it's like,
I have no issue with any black or Asian or brown person, whatever, who says, fuck you, you're racist, I don't want to fucking educate you, because fair enough.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Fair enough.
But what I think what does fuck stuff up is when specifically quite well-educated white people are very quick to demonize and shout down slightly less educated white people who say the wrong thing, because it means that slightly less educated white people who do say the wrong thing, who potentially are racist or at least are repeating things told to them that are racist, don't have an opportunity to learn. They weren't taught anything at school. Every time they speak on social media, they get fucking shouted down and called a racist. So when are they ever gonna unlearn things?
Yeah, obviously they're gonna jump as far away to the other side of they're gonna jump to the side of the argument that welcomes them in, I think.
And it does welcome them. And this is it. It's almost radicalization. It's exactly the same as what happens in other areas as well, where people are radicalized when they're vulnerable, when they feel shunned out by the rest of society, and it doesn't fix the problem.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a problem that the left has had for such a long time, that the left competes with itself, whereas the right unifies and just goes, yeah, come on in, we won't shout at you, we won't virtue signal, we won't tell you who to be and what to think. Whereas the left spends so much time infighting, whereas there's people who are in the middle. So many, like most people are in the middle. Like so many people are in the middle that you just need to go with just a bit more compassion. These kind of well-educated white people who are used to shouting at people and telling them they're wrong and showing off their own intellect need to go, hey man, I think that you should maybe read this article because the things you're saying about this just don't really line up with what's happening.
Yeah. Or has anyone ever showed you this? Has everyone ever showed you this?
Yeah.
Have you ever spoke to someone about this? Have you ever thought about what this song means that you probably fucking listened to?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like rather than going, no, you fucking racist, blah, blah, blah. I can't emphasize enough. Any black person or brown or Asian person who goes, no, you fucking racist, I back you, man. Like I understand
it. But I had a conversation with a comedian friend of mine, Akin Omabitan, who's Nigerian, and he said he's different. He says, I know it's emotionally exhausting for black and brown people to compassionately have these discussions, but fighting racism is emotionally exhausting, and it's a necessary struggle to fight it. But I understand that some people just are fucking done.
This comes back to what I was saying earlier about why I think white people do need to talk about
exactly,
and why, you know, I think the term is cis. I don't really know, but people who are born the same gender as they are now need to talk about transgender issues, because otherwise you put all the fucking onus on black people, transgender people, whatever.
And you don't have to have a hot take on it. You just have to welcome it into the conversation. Just mention it. Just mention it as if it's the most normal thing in the world.
This is the problem, is that, and also because so many of these conversations now happen on social media, they happen in a medium where the only way you can respond is to either like something or share it. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I shouldn't be liking someone telling me what horrific shit happened 200 years ago at the hands of a slave trader.
Yeah, and the angry react just seems sarcastic, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I only use Twitter where it's literally
okay, yeah, it's a heart.
Yeah.
Imagine someone being like, yeah, this guy owned 20,000 slaves. Like
There we go. That's something funny about it.
That's funny. That's the hard thing. It's like I just I just want to agree. I don't want to enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't want to grin as I do it. I want to give a sign of acknowledgement. I want to be like, okay, cool, taking that on board. I've learned something. I don't want to be like.
That's really funny. I'm glad we got something. But this is what's interesting, to tackle those big topics and kind of work through find out what we think about it, and then find out what's funny about how we're interacting with it.
This is what I was saying about why I love previews, is because that's literally what you do. And you just fucking, have you done an hour yet? Have you done your first?
No, so I was writing my first hour to do a work in progress this year, and then do a debut next year.
So I did, but mate, it's so fucking blissful, man. Because as you say, within a 5-minute set or a 10-minute set, even, you can't really tackle big topics.
No, not at all.
You know, tackling racism within working class people. You can't do that in fucking 5 minutes. You can do it over the course of an hour, and you can really enjoy fleshing it out, fucking about on stage. And this is something I do a lot more now, which is write with other comics, because it's much, as I say, I'm someone who I come up with stuff in the moment, in that sense, and this is much closer. The conversation you and I are having right now, this is much closer to a gig than me sat on my laptop.
Yes.
It's not a gig, but the way we're speaking isn't too far away. Mm-hmm. So it's much closer. So I find that is I try and do that a few times a week, is meet up with another comic.
Well, I think in general, just even when you're not trying to turn it into jokes, to work out what you think about something, your thoughts go too fast. Your thoughts just run. You need to speak them slowly, so you can and work out and put them all in place and work out what you actually you think too fast for your own good. It just doesn't work. You need to speak.
You don't articulate. You don't properly articulate a thought in your head. You just let it sit at the back, and you go, "Oh yeah, I've made a decision about it. I don't really know what it is, but yeah,
I know what's happening there."
Leave that in the box. That's fine. We don't need to get that out. Whereas, when you have a conversation about it, it forces you to kind of articulate and fully process
and hear it, and hear your own voice say it, and go, "Ooh, that's not what I mean. And that's not actually what I think."
Say some horrendous shit. And you're like, whoa, what was that doing in there?
Some cobwebs on that one. What? Oh man, we'll have to finish up just for time, but I'll do all this. So if you're on iTunes, give us a 5-star review, write a little comment on there, subscribe. Spotify, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, hit the like button, hit subscribe button. Go back through all the other episodes if you're new to the podcast. They're all fantastic. And catch us every Tuesday and Thursday at 7:30 on YouTube Live. Jacob, do you plug your shit?
Plug my shit. What shit have I got? I do a podcast on BBC Sounds called Jacob Hawley's Job Centre. I previously did one called Jacob Hawley on Drugs, and then I'm going to be starting another one in a few weeks called Jacob Hawley on Love. So yeah, if you just search my name and BBC Sounds, there's a load of shit there that you can enjoy. Beautiful.
Well, thanks very much for coming on. I will hit the button on the YouTube to stop us. Thanks for listening. This has been Doing Bits. End stream.